We're supposed to be quiet right now.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Adam, who cannot
Good
stop
morning.
himself.
I can't.
Talking.
Sorry.
He can't do it.
You're welcome.
Hey, welcome back to webinar number 3 from the three of us, from Adam Countryman of Countryman Consulting, Phil Grimpo of Inspire Media, and Leah Abel of Abel Project Management and Facilitation. So, welcome back. .com. Yeah, so we kind of said when we started this, a few weeks we started talking about doing this, hey, let's have 3 conversations and just kind of help folks as they're trying to figure out transition and where they're at. So we're having a 3rd conversation this week. Last week, we really kind of spent our time looking at how do you make decisions for what you're going to do next? How do you do what you're going to do well? How do we deal with this kind of transition and in-between point? And today, we're going to really focus ourselves on moving forward. So last week was kind of like, hey, first it was sort of here's where we're at. How do we survive it? Second week was a little more, how do we start thinking about what's next? And this week is really, how do we start moving forward? Some of us are in places where we're like going to be starting back to worship in person stuff soon. And for some of us, it's going to be quite a while. I'm in Colorado. We'll probably be, I would guess, 4 to 6 weeks. I don't really know, but it'll be a while. And so we're all kind of in different spots with that. We're going to spend some time today talking about that stuff. So before we start, if you're watching us live and you want to spend some time leaving some comments, we would love that. In particular, we really want to know kind of who's watching and what we can do to help you and kind of where you're coming from. And love if you would take a few minutes to just answer this question. What are the big questions for you and for your congregation in this time? So for your congregation and for you as a leader, what are the big questions right now? We'd love to hear from you and kind of know what those are. And that'll give us a chance to respond to those now and in the future. So with that said, Adam Countryman, lead us off, my friend.
I just had an icebreaker, and I figured that was good for all you DCs out there who love to start everything with icebreakers.
Yes, we do.
Which is so dumb. But here's this is the only icebreaker that I like, and you can buy these at any of your local gas station or thrift store. We didn't give a couple extra minutes for people to log on, so I just want to give 10 seconds. Phil, if you could give us some background music, that would be great. Just go ahead and log on.
Oh.
Love to have you. We can see all your comments, so make sure you comment. All right, great. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for joining us. So, thank you. Thank you. It's my studio audience. I take them everywhere. It's awkward at the grocery store. So, some people, some churches, like Leah was saying, they're not going back for a long time. Maybe that's Colorado. It's probably California. But even when you go back, you're not going to be fully back for a while, right? Like we know there's people who aren't going to go back to church until there's a really clear sign that it's safe and that it's time for them to go back. So I think that that's something that we have to keep in mind. Just because you open your doors doesn't mean that everybody's coming back, right? So we're going to hit a middle ground. It's going to be some people are coming to your church and other people are not that used to come to your church. They're watching online. And then we have this weird group of people who found you online and now they're trying to decide whether to come back or come to your church at all. So this is not a definitive list, what I'm going to talk about here, but and I by no means am saying this is the only way to do it or this is how it should happen. So these points are just starting points for conversations that we can all be having. All right. So number 1, I don't have any cool PowerPoint like Leah and Phil do later because I don't know how to use it. I just want to make that clear. It's not that I don't have it or that I'm not well resourced. I am. I just don't know how to do it. And so I'm not going to. So you're going to need a pencil or something, like I use these. They're stickies, but you can, we'll post these to the ChurchNeXt.online website as well. So number 1, make a decision. It sounds easy, but if you've ever argued with your spouse over where to go to dinner, this is not easy. So it seems easy, but what you're deciding is what's important to you. And the thing that we know to be true, that we know for sure, but that we all hate to admit is that when everything's important to you, Nothing is important to you. So you have to decide, what do you want from your communicators, from your worship leaders, from your pastors, and all those things. One of the decisions that you're going to probably have to make as a leader, or as a leader of a department, or even volunteers, are people in the right seats? And this is a tough conversation, because you're not talking about, do we fire people? Do we lay people off? You're talking about, we have these people, but maybe what you're finding out is that the small groups leader is really good at videography, or the person who has been doing your social media for a long time, she's really great at database management or whatever. So do you need to evaluate that? Like, are you really going to go back to having them do the same job that they've always done when they're better at something else and they've been so effective in this time? Evaluating everything through the right seats. Maybe you have a bass player on your worship team who is actually a guitar player, and you've been having him play bass because you don't have a bass player. Well, maybe you decide now, hey, you know what? He's really more valuable on guitar. Let's move some things around. Let's figure this thing out, because that's not the right seat for that person to be in. So let's shuffle the deck a little bit. We don't ask that question typically as a church, the Big C church. The church is really bad at this. We hire people for one thing and we have them do something completely different. Mm-hmm. And we don't know why, except that maybe that's the thing they're better at, or that's just something we needed at the time. What model are you using for volunteers versus contractors? This is another decision to make. Maybe contractors have gained a little closer place in your heart during this time when you haven't been able to have volunteers show up to do everything. So one of the things I know that Phil and I have talked about in the past is, if you're going to hire one contractor, it's that sound guy. And maybe your sound guy, you realize, hey, you know what? Sound's really important online. Really important. So we need to make sure that we're focused on that. So we're going to put a contractor in that seat. So, sorry, go ahead, Leah.
You watching may be noticing that Adam's picture has been a little funky. I know you don't know that, Adam, but I'm telling you that. But his sound the whole time has been flawless, right? And so you can still pay attention. I know this sounds silly, but it's true. People will sit through good audio, but they are through poor video. Sit through poor audio. So just case in point, Adam's face is blurry, but you can still hear him. So there you go.
Pretty sure that's your Colorado internet, but yeah, somebody on the chat just said, we hired a professional videographer because of that. And I think that's a great point. We're making decisions like that. So you have an opportunity now to make a decision you might not have otherwise made. And whether you're volunteer-led church, staff-led church, council-led, elder-led, these are decisions that can be easily backed up with your current situation. We should be taking advantage of that, making sure people are in the right seats as we move forward. All right, number 2, which Phil put up on the bottom of the screen like he did last time, which was really cool, like as I said stuff. So I'm going to have him start to follow me around, but develop a lens. Okay, so whether this is online, in person, or both, this is a way for you to evaluate through. So it doesn't really matter what this lens is. This lens is particular to you, to your culture, to your environment. So my lens is not going to be the same as Leah's or as Phil's. It's going to be different. What are we caring about? What are we looking at? So some examples of that, like, are you prioritizing the guest and visitor experience first, or is that secondary to members? You might say it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. No, it can't. It can't. That's what a lens is. It helps us focus. And without focus, we're just shooting a shotgun into the air and seeing where the pellets fall down. It's not going to do as much good, except that we'll, hurt a lot of people. That's a terrible analogy. Don't use that one. Can we edit this out later? No. Oh, this is live? Okay, perfect.
Remember we've talked about live versus...
Oh, yeah. That's right. No one is going to admit that they don't value guests. But the reality is that we probably fall into that trap sometimes, even ourselves, right? So when you come back, all these people are going to be gathering. They're going to be like, oh, my God, I haven't seen you in so long, blah, blah, blah. We should have a spaghetti potluck dinner and get together and what do they call it? A progressive dinner where I go to your house and then you go to your. It's like the worst thing for COVID. Progressive dinners is like the secondary only to like Lenten soup suppers. Okay, where like they're all in the kitchen with the ladles in each other's. So, but the point is, you're going to have all these people come back that want to hang out, that want to get back together, that are seeing each other for the first time. But you might have somebody walk in your church who is coming in for the very first time because they saw you online. They're not going to know anything or know what's going on. So if we're not conscious of that and engaging that person and thinking about that person, we're going to lose that person. So you think about the first thing you say on the platform. We're so glad that our family got back together. If that's not immediately followed up with, and we know that that family is expanding, and we know some of you are here for the first time, you just alienated them. Now, it may take a couple more things for you to say to alienate them, but you'll say them because that's not your lens. So we have to look at it through a lens. Is your lens keeping peace with no conflict? Is it providing options for people? Is it to help children's ministry thrive? Is it to reach single moms, young families, homosexuals, minority groups, the homeless? This is not a mission statement. Okay, this is just a way of evaluating what's important. So you're most likely developing or utilizing a lens right now, but maybe you just don't even realize it. So start thinking about it, and you can really start to hone in on this. Ministry is going to be different. We all know that. And if we're lying to ourselves and thinking that it's not, then shame on us. But we don't want to let that lens go when we open back up live. Okay. And then I have one more thing, just one more thing. So easy. Look at that. You, no matter who you are, you have to lead. You have to lead, no matter who you are. There's probably some senior pastors online today. And if you are, you can go ahead and message me your hate mail in the live comments section there.
So we know who you are.
That way Phil can know who you are. I don't actually see names. I don't think, well, either way, I'll just put it on the pile. It'll be fine. But pastors typically understand that leadership is their job, right? I mean, it's kind of what they signed up for. I don't know how much leadership training they do in the seminary, but I'm sure there's some, I would assume. And they understand that this is part of their jobs to lead their flock, to shepherd people, to spread the gospel and be leaders in that. But it's also everybody else's responsibility within the organization to lead whatever they've been given. So whether that's a volunteer team, whether that's, your online hosts, your band, your tech team, your council members, your elders, whatever it is, deaconesses. I think those are still a thing, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's like a lady elder, right?
They have more training than another.
Oh, okay. I'm asking. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. I don't know. So here's the deal with leaders, with these kind of leaders, right? Good leaders will make just as many crappy decisions as bad leaders. It's just a matter of how quickly they get up off the mat and go out and fail again. So if we're scared to fail and we're scared to upset people, or we're afraid of doing something wrong, we're not going to make any progress. We have to fail more often to succeed sooner. And we have to lead through some tough things. Maybe you've had an instance on your team. I know we had at a church I used to work at, we used to have a guy who sang with us all the time, and he eventually had a sex change and became a woman. This really went off the rails. Anyway, so we had to have this tough conversation, right? That was like, we really can't put you on the platform right now. I don't know what's going on here, but that's a thing that I had to make a decision. I could either lead through, or I could just say, hey, we can't have you anymore. See you later. Now, that guy's obviously going through something, right? I mean, there's obviously things happening. And if I just say, thanks, no thanks, what does that say to the rest of my team who's like, man, when I'm going through something, then I guess I just won't come back. We have to lead through the hard decisions. We have to be able to make some choices that may not be the right ones so that we can find out what the right ones were. Use this time to lay groundwork for new leaders. Make yourself replaceable. This is really counterintuitive to corporate culture, which says you always have to work your way up the ladder and be number one and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But if we're not finding ourselves being replaceable, then it's about us and not about the ministry that we're doing. And then, then it's just as good. That's only as good as you can get. And you're not that good. So sorry, it's true. Neither am I. So it's not a judgment. Find and train your replacement during this time. This is a great opportunity to do that. You may have found that at this time, maybe you found out about yourself that you're a micromanager. This is happening quite a bit, I think, is people are going like, oh, yeah, I've got to have my hands in everything right now because I don't know really what to do or what to focus on. If you're finding that you're that person, you're probably seeing your departments only being one person deep, or you're realizing that everybody's reporting to you. So use this time to delegate a little bit, okay? Just send it out and just be like, all right, I want you to do this, 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 and this, and see what happens. Thank you, Kurt Bickle. I see your comment. I appreciate you very much. So the hard decisions are the one that no one wants to make. So whether you're a worship leader, a senior pastor, a children's director, small groups leader, you have the opportunity to lead. So lead your volunteer teams and support staff. Pick a few people to mentor, form an accountability group with a couple people, but use this time. Don't waste it. And I think that's the biggest thing about this is as leaders in the church, we have an opportunity to use this time to lead or to just let it fall by the wayside. And we don't want to do that. We want to use it. So during the comeback, as I'm calling it, man, my hands are huge when I do that. Look at that.
And they're slow motion right now too, just so you know.
Are they? Oh, sweet. Anyway, so during the time of comeback, when you're easing your way back in, we have to understand that one of the lenses I think that we can look at is leading through it and not reacting to it. So that sounds like a greeting card, but it's so true. I think we can react to what people's responses are and try and please one or two people, or we can help lead them through why that decision was made and what are we going to. So maybe we tell our congregation and our attendees, here's what we believe God's wanting for our ministries, instead of allowing them to tell us what makes them comfortable. So comfort and predictability, we're never part of Jesus' ministry. So why should it be a part of ours? And that's kind of the lens that I think if we can develop that as a church, man, we'll see growth continue past this time. So I know that Phil and Leah have some great things to share and all that. We're going to be back together in a couple of weeks too. So anything that you think of that are questions that you might have for me or things that we can help address as a group, make sure you send those in on the website, ChurchNeXt.online. And just kind of be watching your social media. We'll be checking that out too. You can always reach me through countrymanconsulting.com and all of that. So we will be addressing some of these questions and things in the chat. So feel free to put some of that in there. And I don't know who's next, but I'm sure they have PowerPoint.
That's me. And I'm going to also just reiterate Leah's question from earlier. If you could put it in the chat, what are the big questions for your congregation or for you as a leader? So we want to know some of those questions in the chat. All right. I'm going to talk about what do we do moving forward? And there's three topics I'm going to talk about. One is personnel. Who are the people that we're going to need, the volunteers or the professionals? And when I say professionals, that means anyone that's being a paid contracted type of position. Secondly, planning. One big thing is scripting your services. If we're going to be doing broadcasting, this is especially important, but it's also important in general for treating volunteers and tech people well. I think we need to have a tight script, and we'll talk about that some more. And then the last piece here, let me get to my right screen, is practice. We've removed the safety net if we're going live again, and there is no fix it and post. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So personnel, and this comes from and I'm talking from the tech side of streaming. I'm not talking about the other pieces, but what are the basic people that you need? Because I get asked a lot, we want to spend a bunch of money on technology. And then I say, do you have a tech team? Well, no, we even have a hard time finding volunteers to run sound on Sunday. So how in the world is this going to happen? Because some people that you're going to need is some type of a director. And the director is basically the person making the decisions of what is going out on the screen. Okay. The next person is playback. I'm guessing you probably have some type of a lyrics person, a video playback person, someone doing graphics. You probably already have this position right now. If not, you're going to need this person. And you're going to need an audio person. Maybe your audio and your playback are doubled up. That's possible. If it's a church where we don't have a band, that's even more possible because a lot of that audio could be a little bit more set it and forget it. But those are kind of some of our basic positions. And then camera. I don't know if you have a camera operator or just a static camera or some robotic pan tilt zoom cameras. If you have any of those, you may need some type of a camera operator. Someone asked me the other day, is it possible that one person can run the sound, do the playback, monitor or manage the 3 PTZ cameras, and direct the stream? Physically, it's possible, but it's going to be very difficult to do well. And I think that volunteer is going to get really stressed out and is not going to last all that long. So I wouldn't encourage that. I'd encourage for basic setups, you need at least these people here.
And so when you say basic setup on those, you're thinking here's folks who are streaming. And so you're thinking those are positions you need to be able to stream well. So this is what folks who are at home are seeing.
Yeah.
Live. Okay.
Yeah, streaming, or if you're doing image magnification in the room where the cameras are on the screen, or if you're just wanting to record this. Now, some churches have said, well, maybe we're not streaming, but maybe we're recording more for shut-ins. Well, then you're still going to need
all of those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you do iMag on the screens and you're streaming. Like, is there more people required for that?
Right. For
if
streaming?
You're doing both? No, like let's say you're streaming and you're doing image magnification. Like, is that 2 different directors? Is that 2 different things or is it one?
Yeah, it depends a little bit how complicated you get. I think it could be a lot of the same crew with maybe one more person managing the stream. And that's in this next section of being ideal. So like in an ideal situation, and this is happening from big events to even churches of that 1,000, 2,000 people range, but you typically have a director, and the director is the one who's talking in the control room about which camera they want, what they want the cameras to do. The technical director is the one pushing the buttons, and the producer is probably somewhere out in the room talking through everything that's happening. Is the right person in place? Here's what's coming up next. We're talking through the whole script. So in our situation, a lot of times the tech director and technical director are the same person, and the producer may be the same as the playback person here. The playback person is looking at ProPresenter, and they're looking at Planning Center Online, and they're following the service a lot. So we kind of have them produce as well. Okay. Camera operators, you're going to need those people. If you're doing live cameras, you're going to need some camera operators. We talked about the playback person. Audio, and you may also have a broadcast audio person, whether it's one soundboard or in your mixing with an iPad for the broadcast, or you have broadcast audio. An ideal situation, those are 2 different mixes. And then an engineer, utility streaming person. Another person, this in a big setup is 3 more people, but it could be 1. Engineer is someone who's in the room making sure technically everything's working well. If some cable becomes disconnected, I don't need a cameraman jumping off to fix it. I don't need the director or the audio person jumping up to fix it. I want an engineer or a utility person to go out and fix those things. This person could also be looking at the stream and saying, there's another camera that's a wide shot that I use just for the people who are streaming. And that's the person who's cutting that in. So I think of like a big event, like let's just say that when we do the National Youth Gathering, I have one guy who gets a couple extra cameras that I don't use in the room that they cut in every once in a while to the streaming audience. And then the rest of it, they're taking the same feed that I'm producing.
And if you didn't watch last week, I think some of what Phil's sharing now makes a lot more sense, even if you go back and watch Phil's section of last week's webinar, where he kind of talks about when you're trying to stream and you're also live in the room in some of those pieces. So just for a little background, if some of this feels a little overwhelming.
Sure. And I also did a webinar yesterday on directing. So if you want to check that out at the ChurchNeXt online website, just what is the room like? And we did a multi-view to show here's all the cameras we're looking at, how we talk through our decisions. So take a look at that. So for personnel, this is how many people I recommend. And this is what I'm saying, how many people I have on a regular rotation. So a director, I probably only have 2 or 3 people who are doing directing. I don't want to have too many people there. And I have a sidebar here. We don't want to burn out our volunteers. However, we also want them to be good at their craft. and get as much practice as possible. Volunteers need to be successful, and this comes from a tight team with plenty of practice. So imagine if your worship leader got to pick up his guitar only on Sunday morning, and that's when he practiced it and he performed or led, and then he was done for another 6 to 8 weeks. We would never expect that, but we seem to expect that out of our camera operators and our directors and our audio engineers and our playback people. And they come in, and for crying out loud, if you run ProPresenter, you could have 3 different versions of software in the time since the last time you were on, and things look very different. We'll make sweeping decisions on how we produce things different. Someone comes in and says, whoa, I thought we always played the opening video first. No, we changed that a month ago. Well, they haven't been on for a month. So I don't want to have too many people. And there are times where we will say, I'm sorry, that position's filled, but I will let you know. So we typically don't say we want as many volunteers as possible. That means you get as many different quality ranges as possible. We want to train up people when we need them, use them as efficiently as possible. So camera operators, 3 per position. So you're on once or twice a month. Well, it'd be twice a month, I guess, depending on how it all falls. Playback is, again, 3 people. Audio or broadcast, this is where I say 1 or 2 people. If you can hire a person, I think a director position and an audio position are 2 pieces where you could hire a person, give them some type of a stipend, and you want them there all the time for consistency's sake. Okay. And then your engineer, utility, streaming, whether those are 3 different positions or it's 1 position, again, 2 or 3. And we were talking about who do you kick in if you need a replacement. For instance, if for some reason everything falls through and we cannot find a director, a camera operator may be a good director because they've worked with the cameras before. A playback operator who sees the service all the time may step in and be a director. The playback operator,
I think, Phil, the same. Oh, sorry. I think the same thing would go if you had a playback operator, right? And or whoever's running your lyrics and things, that would be a good time to pull someone from the band or pull one of your singers, somebody who understands that can sit in for that position because they know what's happening already. And we don't need to be territorial when it comes to that. And, one of the comments that Jeff made over here in the chat was, should volunteers need to be committed? And then he offers an opinion there as well. But I mean, yeah, we want volunteers to be committed. You're not talking about a lot of people here, but you're talking about some pretty directed positions where people can serve. So I think you want these people to be committed to the rotation, right? I mean, because otherwise you end up with the same thing as every volunteer can serve all the time.
I found if someone isn't on very often, they tend to show up and not really feel like they know what they're doing. They don't really feel connected, and they don't last very long. I kind of want them to jump in and be part of the team, get good at what they do, have a good end product, end result, and they tend to stick around a lot more. So the people who say, I can't be on all the time, they usually don't last that long either.
Your comment about being connected, I think, is important, like building a team within those folks, because people tend to want to be a part of something that's good, and they want to be a part of something, not just the task, but also the people they do it with. So building that sense of team is huge. And
right.
Yeah, Adam, DCEs are better at that than you
Kurt
are.
puts here, how do you help the church recognize and appreciate the mostly invisible crew? I know that in our congregation, our pastor quite often, and even more now, has really been thanking the tech people who have been stepping up and making sure that these streaming broadcasts get out. We will do once or twice a year volunteer appreciation, but I know probably at least quarterly, he's saying something from up front. Hey, we just want to thank our band. We want to thank our tech people, the people you don't see, the people who make sure that things are spelled correctly and the videos play, and they're here early in the morning testing all this stuff. So he does do a good job of that and being encouraging and also listening back when we say, hey, here's a problem. Like, and I'll talk about this in a little bit. We need your stuff earlier. We need you to stand over here. He's like, okay, I trust you guys. You guys are the ones who are seeing what's going on here. I'm not. So there's a really good trust relationship. And I think that goes a long way to showing that you appreciate, not just with your words, but also with your actions, appreciate what those people are doing. They want to have a good product. So
I have something real quick.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Phil.
Absolutely.
Can I butt in? Hi.
Absolutely.
Long time listener, first time caller. To Kurt's point too, I think there's a lot of ways of doing that are, you could run into the situation of like, well, no one thanks me and I'm on the altar guild. Yeah, I think that that's a real thing, but I think you could also do this in a way where if you needed a couple volunteers, you don't have to get specific about which volunteers those are, but a video that's highlighting the tech team that says, you may not know this, but it takes 14 people to put on a service here from X da 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 da. We want you to be a part of this thing, and then afterwards the pastor can take that down and say, man, it's a great reminder to us that there's lots of people who have been here since 6 a.m., blah, blah, blah. And once in a while, I think that that's a great reminder, because there is always the stigma of, well, the people in the band get all the appreciation, but then all these people behind the scenes are doing all this work. So I think it's really important that, and just to you as the director, to create like a good hang for those people so that they do stick around, knowing that they're kind of the unsung heroes.
Yeah, I know we've talked about before, like, do we just do a service where the tech people just don't show up? Let's see how that goes. There's no light, there's no sound, there's no video projection. How is that service? We need those people. We've never done it because we don't want people to have a horrible worship experience, but it's always something we feel like trying. Okay, so the next piece is on the planning piece. Adam mentioned this yesterday. We talked about this. We shouldn't be surprised by what goes right. We should be surprised by what goes wrong. So after the this, wow, that went really well. Well, it should go well. We did our homework. I feel a lot of times we're just pretty much set up for failure. And if it actually works, we're super excited. It should be the other way around. We should really be set up for success. And one of the ways is to have a tight script and have a space in your script for tech notes. So it's not something that's super, it seems like a dumb thing, but have that printed in a way that there's a section where people can write and make notes. Really quick, just an experience story. And Leah and Adam, I think you guys both experienced this a little bit, but 2 gatherings ago, 2016, right before the opening, or right as the first mass event was opening, we realized that we did not have communications. Nobody could talk to each other across the different departments. So we ran that entire mass event, an hour and a half long, on a tight script, and everybody had written down from practice what they were supposed to do when. And I never heard the producer call for a video, and nobody heard anybody talking to each other. And we pulled off the event just because we had a really good script. That doesn't happen without some pre-planning. And
it may seem strange for some of you to think about a script for worship, but just think about what's your outline. If
right.
You don't have the script, what's your outline for what's going to happen? And does everybody have a few quick notes about how that impacts their role?
And I will say that traditional worship is one of the hardest things to produce. And the reason is because there's an assumption that everybody knows what happens. We do this all the time, but there's also a lot of downtime in traditional worship. When the ushers walk forward and grab the plates and bow and turn around and walk back, what's happening then? From a production standpoint for the viewer at home, what am I supposed to put on camera during that part? And are the graphics that I have the same version of the Bible as the one that you're reading? So our pastors, they just don't put on the screen John 3 verse 1-4. We don't do that. We say which version, write it out in your script. And I want to see NIV or ESV to make sure that I am putting on the screen the same thing you're saying. And or
NIV 2004, NIV 2011. Like, exactly. I mean, for crying out loud.
Right. So yeah. I will copy and paste it exactly from what's in your script. And we need to make sure we're all following the same script. Yeah. Okay. So in planning, we have the known knowns. These are things that we know. We know the band is going to play this song. We know when they're going to play it. We know the verses and choruses that they're going to do. Those are pretty simple. There's also the known unknowns. These are things that we know a person is going to be here who's showing up at the last minute. We don't know where they're standing. We don't know what their preamp is like on their guitar. We don't know what this person who's doing a testimony is going to say. Absolutely. So those are some unknowns, but we know that we need to prepare for them. Okay. So we're going to think of some different options of what are some different scenarios so that we're ready to go. And then there's the unknown unknowns. Those are the things that we don't know. And those are the things that are going to kill you. And I say those are the only thing that can be left for Sunday morning. So for instance, I used to have someone say, yep, I got that video done. I'll put it in on Sunday morning. No, you'll put it in on Saturday night and you'll run it and make sure it works, because Sunday morning is too late for us to realize that you made an edit wrong, or that you left a shot in you shouldn't have, or that the audio track was cut out. We were doing an event once for a nonprofit, And they had given me all the videos. I had tested all the videos and everything. And a guy came in during the event and said, I have a new version of the video. And he gave it to me. So I can't guarantee this is going to work. I put it in there. I noticed at the last second that it was going to loop and not stop. So I fixed that, played the video, and halfway through the audio goes silent for 30 seconds. And the CEO of the nonprofit turns around just glaring at me. I didn't have any time to check this. The video editor comes back later and says, I forgot to turn on that audio track. I was working so fast. Well, yeah, you blew the whole thing, you know? So those are the unknown unknowns. That's the stuff that's going to happen on Sunday morning. Okay. So we will have the pastor go through, and Lori puts this out here, that our pastor writes out the entire sermon for us. So it really helps the presenter person know everything that's going to happen. We know word for word where every single cue is. So that's how we're minimizing the unknown unknowns. Sometimes we just get an outline, and there are pastors, some pastors will say, here's what I want on the screen. I'll give it to you on Sunday morning, put it in there and just follow me. It's really difficult. Have your pastor try that sometime to follow you. I don't know what verse they're pulling up, and I think he's going to pull up the verse. So I put up the verse, and then he goes on a tangent for a while. And now that looks like a mistake. And it's always going to look like a mistake on the volunteer. They did something wrong. That's not how you keep volunteers. So we want the pastor to write out your whole sermon, and then we go through and we make a mark and we talk through it. Where do you want that slide? Yep. When I say that word, that's where I want the slide up. It makes the whole production go better. It keeps your volunteers because they really feel like they're part of a good product. So those are some important pieces. And Sunday morning is going to have its own problems. Don't push anything off to Sunday morning. When you come in Sunday morning, everything should be ready except for the things that pop up you had no idea were going to happen. Okay, practice. So some of this is going to take some real practice. We make sure we test all videos, test all audio cues, and spell check every slide. In our process, we review a sermon 10 days out. That means the pastor presents it to people on the tech team and other pastors, and we see the whole thing and we discuss it. Then the week of, probably by Monday, we have all those changes in hand and we start putting together all of the slides. On Wednesday or Thursday, that computer goes to the tech booth. On Thursday, the band rehearses, and the person who's running ProPresenter looks through every slide to make sure they're all in the right order and there are no spelling mistakes. Then on Saturday, the pastor is expected to look through the computer again and make sure his sermon is in correctly and there are no spelling mistakes. On Sunday morning, when the band does their run through, we check it again, make sure everything's in order and there's no spelling mistakes. And you'll still find some things on Sunday morning. When I see a spelling mistake on Sunday morning during the service, it was a true mistake. I know that it was at least checked 3 different times. If nobody had ever checked it, then that's on us. That's not just an actual mistake. That was negligence. So we don't want to have negligence. We want to practice everything. And then before the service, we play every video, make sure the sound guy knows the levels and he makes a note of what the levels need to be. Play every audio cue, and we try to play every video all the way through. Make sure it doesn't accidentally set to loop that we didn't know, or stop weird, or something happens, or it dips to black in the middle, so the director wants to come off of it and doesn't realize that there's more left. We want to practice all those things beforehand. We want to walk through anything abnormal. We tend to get in a rhythm in worship. We know how the service is going to go. So if there's any type of a change, let's make sure we just kind of cue to cue that spot. And I think I have a thing here. Yeah. So where is everyone standing? If there's anything going to be different than the normal place that the pastor stands, where are they? What mic are they using? So the pastor may say, yep. And then I'm just going to call so-and-so on the stage to make an announcement. You don't just say, okay, what microphone are they going to use? I want to make sure if they go grab the lead singer's mic, I don't still have pitch correction and a big reverb and delay on it. That's going to sound stupid. So I need to
There's pitch correction for the worship leaders. What have I been doing all this time
on Adam for years?
Oh man, this is amazing. No wonder I sound so good all the time.
Is this space where this person's going to stand? Is it lit? Presenters typically will move themselves into a place where the light isn't in their eyes, which means they're in the dark. So we want to go through before and maybe put a piece of tape down. This is exactly where you're going to stand. How is that light going to get there? Make sure the lighting operator knows so they're not scrambling. Is there a camera that can pick up this spot? For instance, the first confirmation service we did, we had there's a kneeler and it was turned so the person was facing upstage or facing kind of toward the drums. Then we realized all of our camera shots were the backs of the confirmands. We had never really tested that. We never really thought about it. Now we go beforehand, we check it. Where's the pastor going to stand? Where's the confirmand going to be? And what's the camera angle to make sure that's going to look good? Test all that stuff. And then what is the transition getting on and off? Where's the person coming from? How long is it going to take? If you're streaming and there's a person on stage right, the person stage left could be standing there. So as soon as they're done, we have a camera shot. If the pastor says, okay, now we're going to have the gospel reading, and they walk off the stage and the other person gets out of their seat, makes their way up, gets set up in the lectern, what is happening during that part for the stream, for the video? We need to work through those pieces. Okay.
Yeah, it is funny. There's so many things to think about that you didn't think about before because for a lot of us, we never used cameras, weren't a big part of what we were doing, or maybe any part of what we were doing. And now you really do have to think about that. So where people are standing does matter, whereas maybe before didn't matter because it was all live in the room. It really is for a lot of us, as somebody who's way more of a newbie to this than you are, a big change, a big learning.
And maybe it's not that it doesn't matter, but maybe it just more amplifies the fact that when we were sitting there, we were all just kind of waiting for Jim to get up and make his way up there to present or to present the gospel. And now it just amplified that because it feels way longer in video than it does when it's being done live. So
really true.
We're no longer fixing it in post. That's been really easy for those who have been recording this. And we just say, hey, can we just fix this piece? The safety net is gone. We've set a high bar with production, and now we're gonna have to do a lot of practice to be able to maintain that as we move forward. That's what I've got. If you guys have any questions, make sure you write them here. Oh, Jordan Miller. He says, we gave the pro presenter remote to the pastor and he learned the stress of it. So yeah, that's interesting. Have people, when we train a camera person, we have them sit with the director for 2 weeks to see what we see. I think it's good for the director to go out and run the cameras every once in a while. It's probably good for the lead singer to have to go back there and mix some Sunday and realize how difficult it is when everybody's wanting a change in their earbuds and you've got to fix that. And maybe it's worth the pastor. We will have pastors come back sometimes and just be in the tech booth and see what we go through. And I just I'll fix it.
Yeah, I also wanted to make a quick comment on Jeff made a comment about volunteers and kind of some of the stress that happens in that when, as the people that are leading volunteers and whatnot, maybe we forget they've got other lives as well. And so there's some stress and expectation in that. And so you really do have to be careful with that. I mean, on the one hand, they're a person that you care about and a child of God primarily that you want to care for. And at the same time, you're asking for a lot from them and a high commitment. So just, I think for all of us, especially in this time as stress levels are high, for all of us, just to be just extra grace for each other in that. And I think more communication and more conversations than what you probably did before. Maybe you should have had that many conversations earlier and you didn't, but making time for that, bring that whole team together. I love, Phil, you made the comment about on Thursday nights, the tech folks are there and they rehearse.
Yeah.
Yes, please bring them, because especially if they're new and they're learning, they're a part of the team. They're a part of that group. And
we kind of want to be a small group. So beforehand, we're sitting in the control and we're having coffee together. We're talking in between services. And I talked about this in the directing one yesterday. In between services, what worked, what didn't work. Last week, we had an issue where all three cameras seemed to always be on the same thing. And as a director, that was kind of stressful for me. Between services, they said, yeah, we got to talk that out. And they figured out who was going to cover what. And we just went out and confirmed that, but they're working together as a team. So that's good. I want to answer really quick. Skip, you put, what are you guys using for comms for the tech team? Either some wired comms like Pro Intercom makes very affordable. RTS, the thing I don't like about RTS is that it's kind of an enclosed system. It doesn't work with ClearCom. Or something to check out is Listen Tech. And Listen Tech makes very affordable wireless comms where it's one director can talk to everything and they can talk back when they hit a button. They're really meant for translation or for tour guides and stuff, but they work really well in a situation like this. So you can check out Listen Tech, and I'll try to remember to put that on the resources with this webinar.
Great. Good stuff. Well, I'm going to kind of for my piece of this as the less technical and less worship focused necessarily person, just talk through some kind of a quick list of considerations for returning. There are a million blog posts out there about this, many of which are really worth reading. But I just spent a little bit of time thinking through, what are those things as you're getting ready to go back? And maybe that's soon for you, as we said earlier. Maybe that's a long ways off. But what are some of those logistical concerns and what does that look like? And I kind of put them in three categories. The first one I want to just kind of bring up quickly is logistical conversations. What are those conversations that you need to have, or at least think through, about doors and entry? How are folks coming in the building? Are you queuing people up like Home Depot? Are you using all of the doors because you really want to be able to move people in from different areas? Are you using one set of doors? So really thinking that through. What does seating look like? It's going to depend on where you are, but it's looking like in some of the places that are starting to open already, that there are less places that are saying you can only have 100 people, and more places that are saying whatever you can do as long as family units are 6 feet apart. So what does that look like for you, and how are you going to manage that? How are you doing bulletins? Can you have paper for people to pick up? Is there a way? I think, Adam, you had commented to me, you guys are looking at, can we send out like a PDF that people can look at on their phone? If you have screens, you can use those, but what does that look like? Just think that through. Hygiene stations, if you don't have those, you may be required to have them. And if you're not required to have them, it still may be the expectation of folks that you will. So what do those look like? Do you have them? Where are they? How are you going to do offering? What does that look like? Are you passing the plates? Are you not passing the plates? Are things in the back? Are you just asking people to use their phones to give and give online? How are you doing communion? I want you to think for a second, and I tend to be pretty sensitive to some of our volunteers. I want you to think about your altar guild and the folks that have been on, Betty, who's been on altar guild for the last 15 years. She needs to be a part of a conversation with you about how to do communion and what that looks like differently. And so thinking that through. Other pieces, like how are you going to clean and sanitize in between services? Because it looks like most places are a lot of states, at least, that are starting to opening are requiring that in between services, you're doing that cleaning and sanitizing. So you can't just think we're going to clean at the beginning, but what's your team? What's your strategy for that? So that's just kind of a quick list of those things. Another piece would be some of those volunteer and leader conversations need to be had. How do you need to talk to your ushers? What's your plan with ushers? What do you really need from them now? That's going to look different than their normal job. What about greeters? Are you going to have greeters? Are we going no greeters? Probably not shaking hands, but with the kind of the anxiety, I think, that some folks are going to have coming in, especially first and second time. What do you need them to do to put people at ease that doesn't probably involve touching? And then I think the other piece of that's going to be hard, and we probably all know this, but you got people in very different camps. You've got people that feel like this is ridiculous and we should all just go back to normal. You've got people that are like, I'm not leaving my house until there's a vaccine. And then folks all the way in between. And if you assume that everyone around you feels the same way that you do, you're probably wrong. Because I think all of us feel a little differently about where we're at. And so I want you to think as you kind of train or retrain or converse with your leaders, with your volunteers, how do you help them to say, this is what we're going to do and why? If you're the hugger and you like to hug everybody, you just can't for now. Or if you do, like, make a plan later to meet them at Starbucks and hug them. But like, if you're the greeter and you got the greeter badge on, you can't hug people or whatever that thing is. Tech team, which Phil has talked about pretty clearly as well. And then I want you to think too about what about those key volunteers that you've had that have done different jobs for a long time who need to step down for now because they're a person who really can't be out. They've got high risk stuff. And they're not going to be able to come back for a while. How do you love them anyway? And how do you make plans to kind of to replace them or deal with that piece? Another thing that I think a lot of us maybe haven't thought about, but how are you going to count attendance? You might be thinking, well, like we always have, like, here's the people sitting in the seats, right? But that awareness that now a lot of folks potentially for short term or for longer term aren't going to be sitting in the seats physically. So how are you going to know who's there? How are you going to take care of that? And more than attendance and numbers, how are you going to check your effectiveness? Like I loved what Adam said, the front end of this about leading and making decisions and deciding what's important, what your priorities are. So how are you going to check your effectiveness at meeting those priorities? I think that's huge, a huge piece. Another couple of things to kind of think through as far as volunteers, leaders, staffing would be some kind of a strategy to care for your offsite members and visitors. Like, is there, I loved earlier, Adam, you're talking about, are people in the right spots? Is there somebody that maybe usually they have a role within children's ministry and you've decided that your children's ministry is going to look pretty sparse for a while maybe? So can that person be moved into a position where they're really saying, my job, my primary job is to care for people that are not on site. Whether that's, I don't know if you're doing phone trees or you're doing weekly check-ins or you're checking the numbers and understanding how social media and views work, all those kind of pieces. And then the last one, which none of us want to talk about, but our boards of directors and our leadership need to what are some plans for reducing expenses if your offerings don't rebound? What are the things you can let go, maybe not forever, but for now, for the sake of keeping yourself financially solvent? So I'm guessing, Adam, that you're already having a lot of these kind of conversations with your folks. Any of those jump off the page for you?
A lot of these do. We're in a place where we can have in-person worship right now. We've decided not to for the time being because we just are waiting until we have some more information. But certainly, I think all of those things are important things to think through. And you mentioned the children's person who's great at communicating with people. We actually have that exact situation in one of our volunteers, who's great. She's been sending, notes to my kids at home for years, and she's just a really caring person. So I think, rethinking through those things is important. And, a lot of churches are saying, well, we're not going to make any of these big financial decisions until until we have to. That may be okay, but you may want to start thinking about that. Some people's giving is up in this time. Some people are using online giving, text to give. There's lots of ways of doing that, but certainly I think, evaluating the what if is important so that you don't get caught in being reactionary. You can be proactive in that. I think that's a really smart thing to do. Also, I am going to go to Starbucks after this if anyone wants to hug for a while.
One other quick list, programming stuff. Again, probably stuff that you have been thinking about already. But just a few programming pieces to think about, even just when you come back to Sunday morning. Choir seating, if you have a choir, can they sit where they sit? Can they sit near each other? Can you have your full choir there? What's your children's ministry going to look like? What's fellowship hour or coffee hour, if you have such things to look like? What's Sunday school going to be? What do you do with larger Bible studies? And I know even as I read that list, I start to feel that like in my chest, like kind of like anxiety kind of feeling. I just want to say a couple things about that. One, just decide to do something. Decide what you're going to do, and know that what matters to people is some sense of I'm cared for and a personal connection. And it's hard. Like, I'm a hugger. I'm an extrovert. This whole virtual thing stinks for me. Like, I hate this. And I'm getting tired of virtual church, honestly, because I want more people. I want a personal connection, and it's getting hard. And so know that as you do go back, and you're having to put those like kind of guardrails in place and change some things, just as long as you still find a way to help people connect or feel connected or feel cared about or personal, that matters. And so as you think about these things, it might be that you can say, you know what, I have a choice right now. And the best choice for us to do the best we can for the most is to say, we're not doing Sunday school for, the first 2 months that we're back. But we're going to instead, we're going to work on our goal of more family ministry, and we're going to send home family Bible studies like we've been doing. But some kind of a personal connection in that, and not just a feeling that I'm going through the drive-through and you're giving me a kit, but it isn't for me, if that makes any sense. Something in there. And then the last thing that I want to just kind of touch on is that, and I think Adam alluded to this a little bit, what we have is an opportunity right now that feels pretty scary as we look at things like Vacation Bible School, your fall retreat. Maybe you have some big event for freshmen, high school kids, or maybe you have your Sunday school launch, or whatever those things are. And whether those are really close right now or really far out there, you've got a choice. Are you going to cancel that event? Or are you going to convert that event and do something different? Or are you going to postpone it? And last week when we met and did this webinar, I talked a little bit about some processes that you could use, some kind of simple stuff to do, prioritizing, and just kind of dump out all the possibilities and start to organize those and develop some action plans. So you can find that stuff on our ChurchNeXt website or on my on leahable.com as well. Just free stuff you can grab. But I want to encourage you to say, don't be afraid of the decision, and don't think that your only options are cancel or postpone or a Zoom call. Okay, so Vacation Bible School, for instance, there's some really kind of cool resources out there. I saw something from Lifeway yesterday that I thought was interesting about what could you do with Vacation Bible School. Those of us who've been doing online learning with our children, I've got an 8-year-old at home. she's over it. I'm going to let you know. She's kind of had enough of sitting at a computer for 2 hours a day and doing stuff. And so just offering me that as a parent for Vacation Bible School, maybe I don't really want that. But what are my options? Like, how can you convert? I heard a DCE say a week ago, we were talking about what they're going to do for Vacation Bible School. And she said, well, one thing we've talked about is, could we do a game night, like kickball or something that's pretty, low key or not close together stuff? Could we do a game night for each grade during the course of a week? So every, Monday night is the fourth graders and Tuesday night is the second graders or whatnot, but do something that lets them be together in a way that we can keep them safe. And the other thing that I've seen that I think is a really interesting piece in that is, one, what does your volunteer training look like? Because I can tell you as a parent, the thought of trying to keep children apart is stressful because they want to touch each other like it's who they are. But how can you train volunteers? How can you convert the event to do something that's maybe semi-virtual or some kind of connections? And then how can you involve parents? Those of us who are teaching our kids at home or helping lead them through their school virtually right now, we have to be a part of it. And I would think too, as you think about things like a Sunday school program or a picnic or whatever you could maybe try to do, involve parents in it. One, because if they're there, you give them permission to be in charge of their kids' safety and what they feel about safety. And if you tell them they can't come, then they just have to worry and wonder. And then the other piece of that is you get their buy-in, you get their help. And I know some of us are afraid sometimes to bring parents because they might have opinions. Well, yes, they do. They have opinions, but this is your chance to do that. So again, you got choices now, and things that you maybe before were like a sacred cow that you couldn't get rid of. Now you can just say, you know what? For now, we're letting that go, and it's okay.
Have hamburgers now.
Now, what's that?
I said now you can have hamburgers.
Now you can have hamburgers. Just because you're having to postpone it or convert it or whatever now doesn't mean it's forever. So,
just for the record, I too am a parent, and I have an 8-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 3-year-old, and distance learning sucks. we were going to show you guys a clip from our conversation yesterday of me parenting because it was it's classic.
It was like classic moment, like kids like screaming and like running behind your head. It was fantastic.
Yeah, it was awesome. Somebody kicked me in the groin. It was amazing.
But just as you're kind of thinking through that stuff and kind of making these next steps, I just want to encourage you, don't be afraid of it. Lean into it, decide what matters to you, and go after it. And if you need some help or just kind of thinking through those things, again, there's some resources you can grab or get a hold of one of us to talk it through.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's an hour, guys.
Great.
Yeah.
So Adam said we're going to be back in about 2 weeks. We're going to take next week off. On Friday of this week, I have a webinar. Jeff Cranfield is going to be with us again to talk about audio for broadcast and mixing audio. And then either tomorrow, late afternoon, or maybe over the weekend or early next week, I'm going to do 2 seminars, one on video cameras and one on streaming switchers. So I've been getting flooded with questions on those 2 things. So I really want to get those out as quickly as possible. I'm just trying to kind of manage my schedule. So those 2 will come up. Thank you for I know a lot of people have been watching these not live, but watching them later. So we really appreciate that. If there's any better way we can resource you, please put a comment on the website, comment on the videos, and we'll try to get back to you as quick as we possibly can. I guess that's it.
All right, church, hang in there.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, y'all.